Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in bountiful Bakersfield, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael, and today we welcome back to the show the wonderful Lama Kathy Wesley. And for you guys that don't know much about her, she's a student of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche since 1997 and participated in the first 3-year retreat led by him at Carmeline Retreat Center in upstate New York, earning the title of Retreat Lama. She is currently the resident teacher at Columbus KTC, and we've had her on before. We always enjoy our conversation. And I am particularly looking forward to today because she's going to be talking about the legend, as my husband called it, of Milarepa, who's one of my favorite teachers in the Kagyu lineage, a really extraordinary story, and I think you'll be very interested in what she has to say. But before we get started, Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to our show. We're really excited to have Lama Kathy on again. She's just one of our most favorite and beloved guests. Just want to remind everybody that Krista and I are now doing readings in person at the Enchanted Cottage here in Bakersfield, California. It's a wonderful little metaphysical shop. Krista's there on Saturdays. I'm there on Sundays. And we're also doing remote readings still by Zoom or phone, and you can just book appointments directly on our website, mysticraven.net. Our book, Tarot Alchemy, a Kabbalah-inspired approach to reading the cards, is now available on Amazon. Search under books, so you're probably not going to find it. And thank you for all the wonderful feedback we've gotten on our book. We're very proud of it. You can listen to us as a podcast if you're out and about. Just go to Spotify or iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. Search Sixth Sense Society, and we tend to be pretty easy to find. And you get all the information on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SXTH, all spelled out. And while you're there, if you can afford to, please buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi. It helps us cover a little bit of our cost. And we do appreciate those of you who so generously supported our show over the past. We're now in our 8th season, 8 years of doing this. And with that, I'm going to kick it back to Krista and Lama Kathy. So take it away, Krista.
Thank you, Michael, and welcome, Lama Kathy.
Yes, hi. It's really good to be with you. I wish I were with you in bountiful Bakersfield because it's a little cold here in central Ohio where I live. The sky is blue, white puffy clouds, but that wind.
Oh, I bet.
Current outdoor temperature is 48 degrees. It's actually balmy today compared to some of the days we've had recently. So I'm really happy to think warm California thoughts with you today.
Yes, Bakersfield is nice today. We've been experienced before this, a lot of fog this year, though. Very odd. I mean, I know it gets foggy, but we were like, this seems like really abnormal. And they were saying it's only our second year here, but it's pretty nice right now. So, so today's topic, Milarepa, certainly he's a favorite in the Kagyu lineage. Is he also in other lineages important?
You know, in terms of importance, I think when we think about Milarepa was, I guess you could call him one of the very first Tibetan superheroes, if you want to kind of go that way with it, to get all colloquial about it, because he led an extraordinary life, and you could say that his life was a life of magic and mystery, because he was able to, through the depth of his meditation practice, perform miracles unlike others. And so he was known and admired throughout Tibet, but especially in Eastern Tibet. He was revered there and still is. And in fact, a couple of buildings that are associated with his rather remarkable guru and disciple story are still standing. And I'd like to recommend 2 books, if I might.
Sure.
And I don't have one of them here, but I have the other one. I was looking at my bookshelf. I should have brought them here to my seat with me, but the titles will suffice. The first one is called The Life of Milarepa.
Mm-hmm.
And it is what you're looking for is there are at least 3 or 4 different translations, my dear friend, Professor Andrew Quintman of Wesleyan College on the East Coast, he translated it, and his translation is modern and new, and I love it. And so his last name is Quintman, Quintman. So if you look for that version of the life of Milarepa, you can't go wrong. It's a great book. Then Dr. Quintman also wrote a book about how the life of Milarepa came to be written.
Oh.
By a very unusual man. I have forgotten which century he lived in. Milarepa is said to have lived in the 12th century AD or CE. And then this Sansong Haruka, who wrote his life story, who compiled it, he actually, he was what they might call a crazy wisdom yogi. He was a practitioner of mantra in Tibetan Buddhism. And this Sansong Haruka became a great admirer of Milarepa's stories, which circulated everywhere like troubadours in the Middle Ages in Europe. The story of Milarepa's vast magical deeds went everywhere. He was like a folk hero, both in his time and afterward, as a very highly enlightened being. Well, Sansong Haruka got the idea that it would be great to compile his life story from all of these disparate threads of songs and stories that had been promulgated all over Tibet. So he gathered them all together and created the life of Milarepa as we know it today. And he actually created a printing press, which was kind of unheard of at that time. And he printed copies of the life of Milarepa, but he was seen perhaps as a little crazy wisdom because he had unconventional behavior. He sort of lived like a hermit, like Milarepa did. And so the book that Dr. Quintman wrote is called The Yogin, Yogin, Yogin and the Madman, because the Yogin, of course, is Milarepa, this magical great master of Buddhism and Tantra. But Sansong Haruka was the man who wrote his life story, was widely considered to be crazy. And so it's the story of how this book came to be written and who was this Sansong Haruka? Who was he? So you can get a flavor of both of these remarkable men through this book. So anyhow, so I just wanted to kind of like gush a little bit as a fangirl, both for Milarepa and both for Milarepa and Sansong Haruka, and then my buddy, Dr. Quintman, who he was a tour guide. He was working his way through college. And so he was a tour guide in Tibet in his spare time, because that's how he made some money to go to school. And at one point, he was showing people in an area that was associated with Milarepa's life, showing them around. And somebody came up to him and handed him a book and said, "Here, you have to take this." And people kept doing this with him. They kept handing him books about Milarepa. Here, have this book. Here, have this book. Take it out of the country. We want it to be safe and protected. And so he fell into this scholarship and got his PhD.
Wow, it was meant to be.
In Asian studies and Tibetan language, he became a translator. He translated the life of Milarepa. He wrote this book. Anyway, so as I say, I'm a little gushy today about it because Milarepa is both a folklore figure, a superhero, a great meditator, and an inspiration, because he was also, shall we say, a rap artist, because he taught through songs.
Right. Well, I think it's important to talk about his origin story, though. It's such a, I was thinking maybe Milarepa is kind of like the Mary Magdalene of Buddhism. Though there's some things wrong about Mary Magdalene, but the fact that she is redeemed and that people can relate to individuals that are actually not so great in the beginning. And also it's a good story.
Oh, yeah. I mean, here, I love the whole idea of Mary Magdalene and the fact that she was considered to be one of Christ's disciples because of the power of her story.
Yeah.
So I get it. Everybody loves a redemption story, and boy, did Milarepa have one. The short version, which, you know, me and short, we don't necessarily get along, but anyhow, but the short version of the story is that he was born into an upper middle class family in Tibet. He had a younger sister, and his father owned land and was a farmer, and you know, well to do, but he died. But the father died, and as often happens in these situations, I've forgotten whether it was, I believe it was the father's brother and the father's brother's wife, took over. They came in and said, "Oh, poor widow and orphans, you know, we'll take care of you." And instead of taking care of them, they turned them into servants. They abused them. They made them work. They were not kind to them. They were very rough and brusque with these people. And so this young man, whose given name was Topaga, which is like happy to hear, you know, like good news. Good news was his name, because he was really beloved of his father. And I apologize, I may have quoted his Tibetan name incorrectly. You'll have to check me on that. But he was known as Good News. Well, what happened was that he became very bitter because his mother became very bitter. And she really, really wanted revenge on the family that had taken their wealth and subjugated them. And so at one point, they were having an argument. The mother and the uncle and aunt were having an argument. And basically the aunt or the uncle, I forget which of them said this. Well, said, you know, because she claimed they'd had their patrimony stolen, they had all their money and land stolen, and that they had been forced into slavery practically. And so this was brought up to the aunt and uncle, and they basically said, "Tough luck. If you are many, then you can make war on us to get back what you think we owe you. But if you are not many, then you should just resort to sorcery." And so that's what the mother did. The mother, I know, the mother realized that they did not possess weapons or family or other people who could fight a war to get their land back. And so instead, she sent her son, Milarepa, or at that point, he was known as Good News. She sent her son, Good News, to a sorcerer and said, "Please learn everything you can, because I want revenge." And so Milarepa studied under this sorcerer and learned all of the dark arts of non-Buddhist magic. And because remember, the Tibetan people were shamanistic and also had sorcery. And so shamanistic, sorcery, so forth and so on, curses, all of it. And when the Buddhists came in, they had to learn how to coexist with the shamans and the sorcerers. And that took time, and that's a whole nother topic that I better not talk about today. But because I'm not as well read on that as I'd like to be. So if you want me to come back and talk about that sometime, I'll have to study up. But for this story, for the purpose of this story, Milarepa learned these arts of sorcery, and he learned how to cause hailstorms, which were considered to be a very dangerous form of weather because they could destroy crops.
Right.
And they could destroy homes. They could bury livestock. You know, the whole idea of hailstorms is that they're incredibly dangerous. And so Milarepa learned how to do this. And so he created his sorcery hut, and he meditated on the sorcery, and he did the magic. And he caused a hailstorm to fall upon the aunt and uncle on a special occasion. One of their children was getting married, and they had a wedding party. and the Milarepa caused a hailstorm to destroy the place where it was taking place. The structure collapsed and everyone died, except the aunt and uncle. And so 35 people were killed in this disaster. And somehow because they remembered, the aunt and uncle remembered what they had said to Milarepa's mother, and they realized it was sorcery. And so they said, well, we're going to come for you. We're going to come for you, and we're going to come for good news. We're going to come for you. So you better get out. And so Milarepa and his mother and sister ran. And Milarepa himself was torn apart with grief because he realized that what he had done may have satisfied his mother's wish for revenge, but it had destroyed him in the process. He said, oh, from a Buddhist point of view, I am condemned. I am already a being in hell, because this is what's going to happen to me after I die, is I'm going to suffer horrible torture in hell. I may as well die now and accept my fate. And so he was getting ready to jump off of a height and kill himself. And suddenly he heard someone say, as he was passing them, the name of Marpa. And when Milarepa, who was still called Good News at that time, heard this, he knew Marpa. He will give me the practices. He's a famous yogi. He's a famous practitioner of Dharma. He will help me. He's the one who will save me. So then he went and looked for Marpa, found Marpa, who was a farmer of his own. He was also an upper middle class farmer. He was plowing a field when Milarepa came by, and he offered Milarepa something to drink and eat. And Milarepa said he was looking for Marpa, and Marpa said, well, he's not here. Knowing that, so he starts his relationship with Milarepa by deceiving him. And eventually, Marpa took Milarepa into his care, spiritual care. But he realized that he had a lot of pride. Milarepa had a lot of pride because of his magical powers. And so as a taunt, Marpa said, "Okay, great sorcerer, get out of this," and he actually put him back into servitude.
Oh,
and he
smart.
said, "Yeah, I know that hurts, right?" and because he knew that Milarepa needed to be basically purged of all of his sins, and so he put him to work. And the most famous of the trials of Milarepa, I'll try to recount very briefly, and that is that Marpa said, my son's getting married and he needs a house. Build him a house. Great sorcerer, build him a house. So Milarepa went and carried stones and took a long time, and he built a house. And then Marpa came and looked at the house that he had built and said, nah, this will never do. This is not right. Who told you to build it like this? I didn't tell you to build it like this. Take all those stones down, put them back, and then come with me. So Milarepa had to disassemble the house he had built, put all the stones back. By this time, he had sores on his back from carrying all these heavy stones. And so he was suffering greatly because not only was he in servitude, he couldn't get the teachings. Marpa had not agreed to give him teachings yet. He said, no, you need to work. You need to work if you want to be worthy of these teachings.
Now that's really a very common, that's a common thing that happens with, like in martial arts, where the first teaching is, I don't know, painting a fence or scrubbing floors. And it seems like the Western world, other than some of Trungpa Rinpoche students, they used to prepare for the Lama visits. They would redo the floors, paint walls, and to create this sacred space. But it seems like Westerners are kind of, I don't know, they don't go for that, like doing the scrubbing and the cleaning. But it seems like it's very much part of the Oriental way of training.
It really is, because if you look at what's happening, this incredibly arrogant, powerful sorcerer comes looking for redemption, and he's expecting to get it just like that. And so Marpa was basically working to disappoint him over and over and over again, because that's what he felt that Milarepa needed to cleanse himself of the sins of having killed all those people through sorcery. That was really the only way it was going to happen. It was the only way, was that he said, I needed to plunge him, because later, when it was all over, Marpa explained it to his wife. Marpa's wife, Dogmema, is another famous character from this story. But we don't really have time to go into all of the things that she did. But he is explaining to her, he said, I needed to plunge him into utter despair in order to cleanse his spirit.
Right.
So I had to do it 10 times. I only got to do it 9 times because Dogmema, you took pity on him. And so he said, so he's going to still have some obstacles, but he's going to turn out all right. Well, so this was, as I mentioned, just one of several trials that Marpa put Milarepa through. He had him build that house, like, I can't remember, it was 3 times or 4 times. Every time Milarepa would build it, Marpa would say, I don't know, I must have been drunk when I told you to build it like that. That's not right. Then he had him build it like a triangle, which is the shape of a sorcerer's tent.
Oh.
And he said, what, are you trying to do some sorcery on me? Take that thing down. So, I mean, you get the idea. It was quite the story. In the end, Milarepa was getting ready to kill himself again, to jump off a cliff again, because Marpa was refusing to teach him. After all of these trials, he still wasn't being taught. And Marpa then relented and started to teach him. And so in that way, he had to break down Milarepa's pride as being a powerful shaman, a powerful sorcerer.
Mm-hmm.
And so he broke his pride. And once he broke his pride and cleansed him of all of the horrible sins of killing people, then he said, okay, now you're ready to hear the teachings, because you couldn't have heard them before, because your pride would have gotten in the way of you receiving these teachings. Because what is the Buddhist teaching? If we go back to the original teaching of the Buddha, do no harm, practice virtue, tame your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. And that last one's just a summary. Do no harm, practice virtue, tame your mind. And so he was not ready to hear that. He wanted some kind of quick fix, to be liberated from the torture he was going through because he had killed. And so Marpa had to really work. And you're right, this is a theme that repeats in lots of Asian liberation stories. The whole genre of Tibetan sacred biography is called Nam, N-A-M, Tar, T-H-A-R, Nam Tar, which means complete liberation. And it refers to the fact that these stories tell you how an imperfect being became a perfect one. How they became fully and completely liberated.
Well, I like that. The other thing I liked about Milarepa, I'd forgotten this part where he wanted to first kill himself, and he heard this voice that was trying to help him. And it shows that even in our darkest hours, there is something trying to do good, that we're not necessarily alone, even though he really felt it and you could see why. And I thought, well, that's actually a very good teaching.
Yeah. Oh, because according to the teachings of the Buddha, we all have the potential to become Buddhas. We all possess that. Even the person with the worst actions still has the potential to be a Buddha, to be fully and completely enlightened from the delusion and illusion of human confusion. Okay, we have the capacity to wake up from that, which is why Buddha is called the awakened one. He's awakened from the ignorance of knowing the nature of his mind and how mind creates our reality and how mind creates our experience and how we accumulate karma, how we can remove our confusion. The Buddha said you have to start by doing no harm, practicing virtue, and taming your mind, because through meditation is how we see the layers of our own confusion and delusion. And that's what Marpa set Milarepa about to do. After he finally gave him teachings, he taught him everything he knew about uncovering Buddha nature. And then he sent him away. He sent him to the mountains to meditate in caves. And so that's what Milarepa did for years. I'm going to say it had to have been 6 years, 10 years, 12 years. He practiced in remote mountain caves, and he practiced what became known to our modern day as the 6 yogas, one of which was the yoga of sleep and dream and the illusory body and so forth. And he also learned the inner heat yoga. Now, even though maybe listeners to this podcast may say, oh, now I'm going to go learn about the 6 yogas, I have some good news and I have some bad news. The good news is they are powerful, but the bad news is most of the books about them are not good. And not only are they not good, they are problematic because they will tell you lots of things that are supposedly secret, but they're not helpful.
Right.
So here's what I would tell anybody who's interested in practicing and learning about these things. I think you should read the books by great masters such as Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, my teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, who was one of his teachers, and so on, and read about the inner practices from those sources, because those sources will not lead you astray. Because Rinpoche said people who hear about Milarepa and want to imitate Milarepa, he said it's a mistake to try to do it on your own without a teacher. You need a teacher. He said don't read it out of a book, because most of the books, he said, are wrong. So in other words, we do need transformation. Milarepa desired transformation, and he worked for transformation. Then he had to go into the mountains to meditate alone on the instructions he got from his teacher. And he learned how to survive at high altitudes and cold temperatures wearing only a white cotton robe. And that is why he became known as Milarepa, because Repa was the white cloth. The idea, he was the wearer of white cloth. And that's why he became known as Milarepa.
What about the nettles?
Oh, the nettles. Well, when he was living all of those years in the mountains to practice alone, day after day, like he would even put like a butter lamp on his head so that he would sit in meditation in a way that was without moving. I mean, he really was a strenuous meditator. He survived on very little. And at one point, all he could eat was because he didn't want to go around and beg in the towns, because it would take away from his meditation time. So he lived on nettles for a while. And of course, this is, it does have nutritive value. And the joke was that he ate so much nettle soup that his skin turned green.
Right. I always like that. But what's interesting is I've often, and maybe someone has written a book about this somewhere, is the plants and trees throughout the stories, because Susan Weed is a very famous herbalist. She's really big on nettle. For women especially, it has a lot of amazing properties. So I wonder, is there something more to it that they're telling us? Because it seems like Buddhism is just layered with information. Whether it's about, something symbolic, whether really there's something important about nettles that can actually help us. Because I remember her, just when I first read her book, going on and on about nettles. I was like, really? I never even thought about it. Not the most pleasant taste. They're bitter.
Yeah, I know.
But it kind of stuck in my head even when I first heard it, the whole story of him turning green and the nettles. And the other thing that I think that when you're talking about people wanting to imitate Milarepa, personally, I never was inspired to do that, because I know that it wouldn't work for me. I just know I'm not that dedicated. But what has inspired me, and I wish I could remember some of the specific songs, were the songs that he sang. Right. And there was one because I now really call myself a householder. That is really my path. And I never really recognized that's really what I want to do. And
Right.
And he had a really good quote at one point about to this woman who was a householder, and it was a really good teaching on how you can become enlightened. But I lost it, and then I haven't been able to find it again. I've Googled it, I've tried different phrases, and I said, why didn't I save that? And because it was really, first of all, it was inspiring because he was saying, hey, you don't have to do things the way I do them. There are other paths
That's
to
right.
enlightenment. So I really feel I benefit a lot from the songs when I've read them, the
Yeah.
teachings.
Well, in fact, there is a wonderful book that was I forget who translated this particular version, but it's called the 100,000 Songs of Milarepa. And the book is this thick. It's really big. And it's full of these stories. And I think that they function in such a way, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, for fun, 'cause, do you guys do bonus material on your website? If you do, I'm going to give you I'll send you a couple of songs.
Okay, cool. Yeah. No, we haven't yet, though we have thought of doing it. So.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'll share something with you.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And because he was able to, he did say, he said, all of you do not need to practice as I have done, because I paved the way for you. So you don't have to practice like this. I've learned, and I have encapsulated what I learned, and I will give this to you in my teachings, so that when you read these teachings, you're learning from me, and then you will not have to undergo all of the hardships that I underwent. But I think the point of the hardships is that he recognized that he needed to, in some way, atone for the murders he committed. He needed to cleanse himself of the arrogance and the violence, and he did that, and he emptied himself completely, doing no harm, practicing virtue, taming his mind, and he tamed his mind to the point where he could see the nature of his mind and cut through all of the illusion and delusion of his mind, and this is what enabled him to enact miracles, the miracles he became famous for, such as being able to fly. He was reputed to have been able to fly, and he was said to be able to run so fast that he could get from one place to another almost instantaneously.
Wow.
He had the power of bilocation, and other types of miraculous powers. And there was a wonderful book, and unfortunately I'm looking at my copy on the bookshelf here. It's out of print. That was called the 16 Karmapas of Tibet. And in the foreword, Reginald Ray, who went on to write books such as The Secrets of the Vajra World and so on, he explained how a transcendent state of mind could lead to miraculous activity. So he basically explained the magic. He explained the capacity that these great masters achieved in order to enact miracles. But he made the point that these miracles were not an end in themselves, because if a person, all of the teachers I've heard who talk about Milarepa say that if you do Dharma practice hoping to become capable of flying and doing miraculous things, then you're wrong-headed. Why? Because what Milarepa had to cut through was his ego fixation. Remember his arrogance? That was the real miracle. That was the real miracle of Milarepa. It was not that he could fly or bilocate or any of those things. It was that he overcame self-grasping. He overcame it so that if someone insulted him to his face, he would be able to return them with kindness. You see, because he knew the basic nature of all things was empty luminosity. And then when he had come to realize that, not just on an intellectual level, but on a felt, embodied level, he was able to then perform miracles. But one of my teachers said, if you set out to accomplish miracles, you will probably only accomplish your own disaster. Why? Because that ambition is ego fixation's activity.
Yeah,
Who wants that?
I did get that impression in some of the yoga texts too, that these abilities are side effects. And I think I was researching clairvoyance at one point for the show, because it's really actually, when you research it, there's so much more to clairvoyance than what people realize,
right?
Including me. And they were saying that, yeah, you're not supposed to intend these are side effects, but if it can benefit people when they do happen, you can use it then. So even using it selectively, if it's a tool, and you know, you can meet people sometimes that have some psychic abilities that really aren't the greatest human beings. And I know in the New Age movement, it's seen like if you have a psychic ability, that means you're a high level being. And my own experience of that from other, you know, people I've met that have some abilities, that's not necessarily true, you know?
Well, that's right. See, and I think that we have to not mistake the side effects for the thing itself. You see what I'm saying? You know, because the real miracle is to be able to overcome your own ignorance. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so you have to be able to do that. And so I'm looking at this one particular song of Milarepa. Can I? It's about
Sure.
Several. It's just a few stanzas. Milarepa is talking to a young woman named Sally who ran away from home essentially and came to try to become his student. And he says, well, I'll teach you on meditation. He said, "O faithful meditator Sally O, wipe the dirt from the mirror of mind and look into the space of the stainless sky. With the blessings of all the previous yogis, go meditate in the mountains in solitary places. The reason for wandering in mountain retreats is to gain mastery. Look at mind's nature. Now I'll explain the way to look. Listen without distraction." And so, then he says, taking the mountain up there as an example, you should meditate free of movement. To give rise to the Buddha's good qualities, do this with determination that forbears pleasure and pain. So then this type of thing, where he would then use natural features of the land as examples. And it's really kind of amazing, that he would give give instructions using the mountains, the river, the sky, the sun and the moon, the ocean, meaning the large lakes of Tibet, and then the earth. And it's just really lovely,
I think that's why his songs will have a sort of stay around for a while. Like, it's true that some of them have more jargon in it than others, but a lot of them you can still get the sense of it, and that connection to the natural world is really ubiquitous. It's like everybody can relate to it. And of course you could see why he would naturally use that, because of all the time he spent in nature, that he really experienced, just like indigenous cultures. They really have experienced being in nature in ways and have that wisdom of living in nature. Whereas unfortunately, a lot of us are really cut off from that, which has caused all kinds of problems. And not that we all can go back and live in nature, but maybe we can incorporate some of it back in. And I think that's another way. He's sort of a ecological teacher.
Yeah, he talks a lot about that. In fact, some of his songs begin with words of praise for his location. Like, wow, this place is amazing. And everything here reminds me of the purity of mind, that kind of thing, where he just immediately takes, and I spoke to a friend of mine, a Westerner who translates from Tibetan. And he said, well, if you ever go to Tibet and you see the vast open horizon, You know, he said, of course your mind quiets down in such an environment, you know. And he said, and when your mind quiets down, he said, that's when you can take it out for a spin. So, in other words, one can meditate without too many impediments.
What do you think it is that makes someone like Milarepa decide that not only is he going to practice, but to do it on such a level to become, you know, awake after having done such terrible deeds? I mean, one of the sort of $1 million questions I have working with clients is, where does that willpower come from? And how do you sustain it? You know, that's the other thing is like, you know, a lot of people have good intentions, whatever they're doing, and they can't sustain it, including myself, I will say. And it's interesting to see lives, and there are people like that, you know, that have lived a life where they sustained their dream and gotten through all kinds of obstacles. I mean, what do you think it is about Milarepa that where he decided to do that?
Yeah, and you know, I think he himself was asked about this, and I can't quote it word for word, of course, but he said something to the effect of, what motivated me first was desperation for salvation from hell. So that was the first thing that motivated him, was the fear of hell. And that's why he sought out Marpa with such, you know, desperation, was because he wanted to avoid hell. He wanted to just be you know, redeemed. But it wasn't until after he started getting close to Marpa that he began to understand the teachings on a different level. He heard about the two great motivators in Tibetan Buddhist practice, which are compassion and devotion. The two great motivators. Compassion, because my teacher, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, basically said, when the mind of an individual person is absorbed in compassion, or it is absorbed in devotion, he said that absorption prevents any negative mental affliction from arising because it's so powerful. And so what the Tibetan tradition does in the precursor practices to the tantras, what it does is it teaches you the bodhisattva ideal. Okay, the bodhisattva motivation. It teaches you that behind do no evil, practice virtue, and tame your mind. Behind that is the wish to be liberated for the benefit of others. That's called the bodhisattva motivation. But you can't just, you have to actually train in this. And that's why in mind training practices, the Tibetan Lojong practices, in Tibetan Lojong practice, you imagine, you spend every day, a few minutes every day, just imagining that you breathe out goodness to all beings as vast as space, and you train yourself to see others as being just like you. So you think about them with equanimity, and you build that compassionate wish to be of benefit to them. And my teacher, Khenpo Rinpoche, said, when you start to wish to be of benefit to others, he said, this starts a momentum of goodness inside you that eventually becomes self-sustaining. So that's how we train in compassion. That can be as big as all outdoors. And so that's why great manuals, such as the Great Path of Awakening, my favorite mind training manual, talk about practicing all day, every day. Like when you're happy, you imagine you share that happiness with others. When you're sad, you imagine you take on the sufferings of others. And by doing this, you train so completely in compassion that it actually consumes, it becomes your new reason for being. You don't have a selfish motivation because you've purified yourself of that through diligent practice of compassion. And devotion is similar. When you create create a relationship with a master, which is why so many Asian traditions emphasize the master, because Marpa was Milarepa's master. And Milarepa would always begin his songs by saying, I bow at the feet of Marpa the translator, some form of that, because it was through his teachings that he attained any goodness at all in his life. So he said, what you do is you remember the word for devotion in Tibetan is mugu, and it means enthusiastic respect. And so we respect and are grateful to our teachers for their development of Dharma, a development of spiritual life, and we aspire to attain the same.
I think the devotional part, in my view, has caused a lot of problems, though. And I think it has to do with people not necessarily developing the proper student-teacher relationship. In other words, sort of looking to see if the teacher really is a legitimate teacher. But with all the Epstein files coming out, I've been thinking a lot about the stories that have been around a little while for some of the abuse and the leaders in Tibetan Buddhism that shocked people, that were some that got away with it completely. And they were trained teachers. They were not, pretending to be a teacher, which is a whole nother con, right? Making up a cult. And I think the devotion part is, I like the devotion part personally, and I feel very fortunate that I found Khenpo Rinpoche first. Yeah, but I could have easily personally have gotten into a cult. I think I think I was very naive, and I just, whether it's karma or luck, but I have seen, and I know people that have suffered when they found out their teacher was not who they said they would be. And so that part, the compassion, I can't see going wrong ever, but the devotion, how do we stay away from sort of that warped devotion where you don't really question the teacher no matter what? You just say, well, that's devotion. I'm not supposed to question the teacher, even though this seems abusive to me. So how do we allow ourselves to have this devotion without that?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that Rinpoche told me we could do, and we could and should do, is read the classical literature on the qualities that teachers are supposed to have. And once we read the classical literature on the qualities that teachers are supposed to have, we'll know which ones are worthy of our trust and which ones are not.
Right.
So I think that being able to look at these texts and say, such simple things like, do their words and actions match? Do they ask people, this kind of thing.
Right.
The ancient masters like Marpa would do things that we would think of as being abusive, putting, but that was because they were enlightened beings. We don't see those anymore. We don't see those. So we have to be more pragmatic as students and evaluate whether teachers meet those requirements. Okay, it's like that. And I remember Bartoku Rinpoche said one time, he said the best teacher would have 3 characteristics. They would have the outer behavior of the Hinayana, meaning they would have pure morality, never do things that are wrong.
Right.
They would have the outer behavior of the Hinayana. They would have the inner motivation of the Mahayana or the Bodhisattva, okay, the wish to benefit others. And they'd have the most inner conduct of the Vajrayana, meaning that they apply sacred outlook to themselves and to others. So I use that all the time to tell people that this is how you can evaluate a teacher. Outer behavior has to be pure.
Right.
Inner behavior has to be kind and loving. And then the most inner behavior is like this regard, this high regard and respect for individuals as being Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to be.
That makes sense.
And
And
so-
the thing I always enjoyed about Khenpo Rinpoche, and I noticed, was he never talked about himself in any capacity in an elevated
Right.
way. In fact, I
Right.
remember him saying sort of derogatory
Yeah.
things about himself publicly, which
Oh,
of course
yeah.
would be
He
like,
would-
really?
Oh, yeah.
He'd say he has
Oh,
the
yeah.
kleshas,
Oh, yeah.
and he always struck me as genuinely humble. So it seems
Yeah,
like a certain kind of humility is also a sign of a teacher, in
yeah.
my opinion.
Oh yeah, this is absolutely true. And I feel like if we look at the, I'll bring you, we'll bring the sort of story of Milarepa to a close here by talking about his death. That he actually was murdered, and what happened was that a jealous scholar who had no qualities from his meditation became jealous of Milarepa, and he killed him
Wow.
by giving him poison. And Milarepa knew that he was being poisoned, and he forgave the poisoner. And he said to his own disciples, yeah, this is all okay. Everything's fine. I will remain as long as I can. And he lived for some time. And in spite of being poisoned, he lived for some time. But then eventually he died. And but the idea was that he wanted to purify any karmic debt that the murderer was had accrued, so he was doing this out of compassion. It was really interesting.
I didn't know that about him. Now, what happened with the scholar? Did he change his ways after that?
I gotta be honest, I don't remember that part of the story.
That's all right.
I shouldn't bring up stories I can't explain.
No, it's okay.
Yeah. But to tie this together, with what we were talking about, teachers who are worthy and teachers who aren't worthy of respect. I feel like we do have to make that decision, but once we find someone who is worthy, then we work with them and do our best to practice, not just, the words they give, but practice their behavior, meaning their kindness and their compassion. And I think, that Milarepa's story is a story of redemption, and a story of how a person could go from the worst type of arrogance possible to murder people. That's what Milarepa did.
Yeah.
And he accepted his fate in the end. And in the end, his story became one of just transcendence, because he was able to, after his passing, he appeared to his disciples.
Wow.
And continued to give them teachings. It's really interesting. Are
there practices directly connected to Milarepa?
Oh yes, there are. There's a Milarepa Guru Yoga that has been written, and I feel like anybody can become a disciple of Milarepa by reading his life story. And I wouldn't try those things at home. I wouldn't try all those hardships at home.
Yes.
But because it was a different time and it was, different situation.
I did want to mention that just by chance, Milarepa Day is coming up in March.
It is.
And it's this year it's March 2nd. And that was when the Trumper Riches students would read the 100,000 songs all day. And it was kind of arduous, but I did enjoy it the one time I did it. I would do it again for sure.
Yeah. I think it's a wonderful practice. And so, anybody who wants to, to kind of follow up on their interest in Milarepa should definitely read his life story. And then, even if you don't fully understand the songs, just open your book randomly and then read one and see if it has something to say to you.
That's bibliomancy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
yeah,
that's always a lot of fun. And look, I went back. In fact, I was going to go back after the show and reread some of the songs. And there's definitely ones I don't understand, but there's many that I do, and they are really beautiful. I think if you like any kind of more of that sort of spiritual, ecstatic poetry, that kind of thing, but.
He's got that.
He's got that.
Yeah, he's got that. There's a dedication prayer that there was a 20th, 21st century teacher named Kempo Sultram Jomso, who was, you could say, a modern day Milarepa, in that he didn't have a place to live and he wandered everywhere, and he taught through song. And Kempo Sultram asked his students to translate some of the songs of Milarepa. And there's one that goes like this. he wrote one that was Milarepa's aspiration, and it's like goes like this: May we live long and be free of illness, enjoy freedom, great resources, and happiness. Next life may we meet in the pure realm. May we always practice Dharma and benefit beings. So, I mean, it's like, why not, right?
Yeah, that's lovely. I like that.
Yeah. There's one other that I like a lot. It goes like this: Ama, the phrase in Tibetan, Ama means wow, And it goes, Ama, the phenomena of the three realms of samsara. While not existing, they appear. How incredibly amazing.
I've never heard any of the music to it. That's really nice.
Yeah. Well, these are modern melodies that were written by Khenpo Tsultrim Gyaltso's students at his request. The traditional ones are actually just they're straight chants.
Mm-hmm.
Da 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 da. So it's like, there are some that are sung to melodies, yes.
That's nice.
Yeah. Oh gosh. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about Milarepa, and I kind of now that I misremembered some of the parts of the story, I'm like, oh, I should have studied more. But I hope that this gives you guys a little bit of a flavor of this incredibly magical person, and I hope you want to learn more about him. So that's
I think so, and I love that you called him one of the first superheroes. Totally, the whole flying and it speaks to us that the superhero, and I think that even though you're correct that the real miracle, I think, is really what he overcame as a person and not this, but it's still kind of a fun part of his story and a delightful part of it. I think it draws people in and that might not even be interested. Comic book people
That's
would.
right.
I think isn't there a comic book Milarepa? I think there may be somewhere.
Yes, I have it on my bookshelf over here. Let me grab it.
Yes,
You'll see it.
I recall seeing it. I don't know, years ago, and I didn't follow up on it, but I think there is a comic book Milarepa.
Here it is.
There you go.
There you go. The Magic Life of Milarepa.
There you go.
And it's like a superhero comic book. And it's got lots this is him meeting Marpa. I mean, it's really kind of cool stuff.
That's really cool. I love it. When did that come out? Was that a while ago?
It's a while back. Let's see. Oh yeah, it was published in 1991.
Okay, that's why I didn't remember it for that well, but I recognized it as soon as you showed the cover. I thought, yes, that's the one I saw anyway. But before we close the show, I wanted to see if there's anything you wanted to talk about with your Columbus KTC. What are you folks up to?
Oh yeah, Columbus KTC. Yeah, we have a web presence, and you can find us Columbus like the Italian explorer, Columbus KTC.org. You can find us online. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram, and we have a live webcast of Dharma teaching every week. At 11:30 Eastern time, which for you out there on the West Coast would be what 9:30?
Mm-hmm.
Pacific time.
8:30, 9:30, 10:30, 8:30.
8:30. Okay, 8:30 Pacific time, and so it's Facebook Live, YouTube Live. We're there every week teaching some facet of Buddhism. And we just put the spire, the golden spire that goes on top of a Tibetan temple. We just put our golden spire up.
Oh, nice.
And so now the shrine is finished and the golden spire is on. So the lamas, our head lamas in New York, say it's time to dedicate the building. So we hope to dedicate the building formally in May this is 2026. So So it'd be 10 years exactly since the fire that destroyed our previous building.
Right.
And so it took us 10 years to raise the money and build. And we got it finished we opened in 2022. And so we're now in our third year or so actually fourth year now in the new building, and we're trying our best to do retreats, and we're going to eventually try to put together a pilgrimage idea so that people can come to Columbus KTC, because we have, if you go online, you'll see the beautiful statuary that's there, and it's a remarkably uplifted space now. And so we want to share it with anybody.
Well, thank you, Lama Kathy. We really appreciate you coming back and talking about Milarepa, and we thank you all for tuning in. Join us next time as we continue to explore the esoteric and the obscure. Have a great week.